In 1933, deep inside the suffocating archives of a forgotten European ministry, historians found a battered leather ledger detailing a civilization that supposedly never existed, yet controlled millions of lives for 4 centuries. They didn't just vanish from the earth through natural attrition or ordinary decline. They were meticulously, violently erased from every map, scroll, and stone monument by people who feared their memory even more than their swords. Welcome to the dark, unsettling reality of history's greatest forgotten empires. We are constantly taught that history is written by the victors, but what happens when the victors decide to pretend the enemy never even breathed? We assume that once a civilization reaches a certain size, builds roads of stone, and mints billions of coins, it's permanently baked into the timeline. But that wasn't even the worst part. Entire populations, cultures wielding terrifying technological marvels, and empires stretching across continents have been systematically scrubbed clean from our collective memory. And then something even more disturbing happened. We stopped looking for them. Let's step back into the terrifying depths of the past, starting with the first major subtopic of our journey: Historia. We begin in the scorching, bone-dry plains of Central Asia, where winds whisper secrets of blood and gold. Long before Genghis Khan terrorized the steppes, there was another empire. Let's call them the Xiongnu, though that's just a label pasted on by their bitter enemies. They didn't leave books. They didn't carve grand triumphal arches into mountain faces. Their entire legacy was forged in bone, iron, and stealth. For nearly 500 years, they extracted humiliating tribute from the Han Dynasty, forcing the Chinese emperors to hand over silk, princesses, and grain under the threat of total annihilation. Yet when they finally collapsed, their cities didn't crumble into picturesque ruins like Rome or Athens. Their wooden yurts burned to ash. Their nomadic camps dissolved back into the dirt, leaving almost zero archaeological footprints. It's as if millions of people simply evaporated into the thin mountain air. How do you erase an empire that spanned thousands of miles? You start by rewriting the history books. The Han scribes didn't just record their victories. They systematically destroyed every scrap of writing the nomads left behind, painting them as mindless beasts rather than a sophisticated, highly organized military state. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath the shifting sands of the Taklamakan Desert lie the bleached bones of another forgotten giant. These people weren't Asian in the traditional sense. Mummies pulled from the dry earth reveal European facial features, tartan fabrics, and towering stature. They built vast trade networks connecting China to the Mediterranean, a Bronze Age superpower that controlled the lifeline of the ancient world. Then, they simply vanished. Was it plague? Was it war? Or was it something far more sinister? A deliberate purge by rising neighboring powers who wanted to control the silk monopoly without sharing the credit. The silence from the dunes is deafening. But that wasn't even the worst part. When archaeologists first unearthed these mummies, local legends warned them not to disturb the resting places, claiming the empire didn't fall because of external invasion, but because of an internal psychological rot. The ruling class had engineered a society based entirely on absolute surveillance and psychological control, where dissenters were buried alive beneath the city walls. Imagine living in a state where every whisper was heard, every citizen monitored, and when the empire fell, the survivors themselves decided to bury the evidence so nobody would ever have to suffer under that nightmare again. Do you really think we know everything about our past, or are we just reading the sanitized comic book version of human history? Consider the Garamantes in the Sahara Desert. For over 1,000 years, right in the middle of the most hostile desert on Earth, they built a thriving, advanced civilization complete with underground irrigation systems called Fogara, chariot warfare, and monumental stone architecture. They weren't just a few scattered tribes. They were a formidable empire that traded extensively with the Romans. Yet ask the average person on the street today about the Garamantes, and you will receive a blank stare. Why? Because the Romans, and later Islamic conquerors, didn't just defeat them. They diverted their water sources, turned their lush agricultural valleys into dust, and let the desert reclaim the rest. They died of thirst, and history let them fade into the haze of the dunes. And then something even more disturbing happened. Modern satellite imagery revealed thousands of hidden settlements across the Sahara that no historian even knew existed, proving that our maps of ancient power are woefully, terrifyingly incomplete. What else is hiding beneath our feet, waiting for a satellite scan to expose the lies we've been fed? Let's move deeper into the jungle, where the earth itself seems to conspire against human memory. In the Amazon basin, long before European ships touched the shores of the Americas, there weren't just primitive tribes hunting with blowguns. Recent LiDAR scans have pierced through the dense emerald canopy to reveal sprawling, interconnected urban networks housing millions of people, complete with geometric earthworks, defensive ditches, and advanced agricultural terracing. These were massive, complex empires capable of massive engineering feats. So why didn't Cortez or Pizarro write home about giant stone cities in the jungle? Because by the time the Europeans arrived, the empires had already collapsed, and the relentless jungle had swallowed the evidence in less than a century. The trees grew over the plazas. The roots cracked the foundations. The acidic soil dissolved the bones. Nature acted as an accomplice to total erasure. But the real horror isn't that the cities were lost, it's why they fell. Environmental collapse, driven by overpopulation and resource exhaustion. They literally consumed their own world, cutting down the last trees, exhausting the soil, and descending into brutal civil wars before the final silence took them. Does that sound familiar? Are we sleepwalking down the exact same path, destined to become a forgotten empire ourselves, buried beneath our own plastic and concrete, waiting for some future alien archaeologist to wonder who we were? Think about the Khmer Empire, or the Mississippian culture at Cahokia, which was larger than many European cities of its time, yet vanished, leaving massive earthen pyramids and zero written records. They had a complex social hierarchy, extensive trade networks stretching from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico, and then, around the 14th century, they simply packed up and left. Whole cities abandoned overnight. Why would tens of thousands of people walk away from their homes, their temples, and their ancestral lands? The oral traditions speak of a dark time, a profound spiritual and social breakdown, a terrifying realization that their gods had abandoned them. When a society loses its shared illusion, it doesn't just lose a war. It disintegrates from the inside out, leaving behind ghost towns that echo with unanswered questions. How fragile is our own civilization? How many layers of dead empires are we walking on right now without even realizing it? Every time a highway is paved, every time a skyscraper foundation is dug, we churn through the bones of forgotten worlds. We live with the arrogant assumption that our modern world is permanent, that our digital records will last forever in the cloud, that we are too big to fail and too smart to be forgotten. But the Earth is a graveyard of superpowers. The dinosaurs weren't the only things wiped out by sudden, catastrophic shifts. Entire human epics have been dumped into the cosmic memory hole, leaving behind only tantalizing, disturbing fragments that defy our neat historical timelines. What if history isn't a straight line of continuous progress, but a brutal cycle of rise, total collapse, and deliberate amnesia? What if the rulers of our own world know about these cyclical collapses and are actively hiding the truth to prevent mass panic? As you walk through your city tomorrow, look down at the pavement and remember that beneath the asphalt lies a deep, dark abyss of forgotten human ambition, blood, and terror. What other terrifying civilization was completely erased from the timeline, and why did the survivors beg the future never to speak its name? Think about the implications of these lost chapters. We build our entire understanding of human nature on a handful of well-documented survivors: Rome, Greece, Egypt, China. But they are merely the exceptions, the ones who managed to claw their way into the permanent archives before the ink dried or the fires took hold. The rule of history is erasure. The norm is oblivion. Every single great city we admire today is built atop the silent, forgotten foundations of something older, something whose name was cursed by those who came after. Consider the ancient city of Troy, once thought to be purely mythological, until Heinrich Schliemann literally dynamited through multiple layers of ancient cities to find it, proving that beneath every glorious civilization lies another one that was utterly destroyed, paved over, and forgotten. If we look closer at our own global footprint, we begin to realize that our modern arrogance is entirely unfounded. We are merely renting space on a planet that has hosted countless advanced societies, all of which believed their dominance would last forever. They laughed at the thought of their own demise, just as we laugh at the idea that our global internet, our towering skyscrapers, and our vast satellite networks could one day be reduced to unreadable sediment in a geological layer. The archives of the Earth are vast, cold, and entirely indifferent to our pride. Every empire believes it is the center of the universe, and every empire eventually learns that the universe moves on without them. The ledger found in 1933 was not an anomaly, it was a warning. A reminder that entire chapters of our shared human story can be ripped out, burned, and forgotten, leaving us to stumble blindly in the dark, believing we are the first to walk this far. But we are not, and we will not be the last to fall.